Hi, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who is joining us today for this interregional exchange of experiences between the municipality of Santiago, Chile, and the other regional cities. Today we will discuss migration governance, and my name is Jocelyn Manzano. I will be today's moderator. First of all, welcome. And have a happy new year. And for those of you who wanted to listen to the conversation in a different language, if you go to the bottom of your screen where it says interpretation, or where you see the icon of a circle, you can choose the language that you want to listen this conversation in. You can hear it in its original version in Spanish or in English or Portuguese. I will also give the same instructions in English for those of you who are hearing us in that language. So we can start our session with some welcoming remarks from the UN Resident Coordinator in Chile, Mrs. Maria Jose Torres. Over to you. Thank you so much, Jocelyn. Hello, everyone. Greetings from Santiago. It is a pleasure to be here with you and to greet the fellow colleagues who are joining us from Mexico, Colombia. I would like to send my regards to Camila Gonzalez from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Chile, and also Abner Saldívar, Dana Glaber-Gladek, Chief of Mission of IOM in Mexico, and also Resident Coordinator of the UN system in Mexico City, Richard Velázquez, Chief of Mission of IOM in Chile, Rosario Olivares, the Deputy Director of Equality, Gender, and Sexual Diversity and Inclusion, Jorge Garcia, Deputy Director of Immigrant Inclusion at the Department of Social Welfare, also Brian Rodas, Coordinator of Immigration Policy in São Paulo, as well as Mr. Javier Augusto Ruiz, Technical Director of the Special Unit of Special Migration Unit of Medellín. Welcome also to all the participants who are joining us or watching us on YouTube. I want to be very brief in my remarks because the most important point is to hear the experience of other cities. I would like to explain why in 2021 the UN system decided to launch efforts to recover from the economic impact of the COVID pandemic. The Migration Fund was expanded in order to work with local governments. And I will explain why local governance is so important. There were two main points of entry, Mexico City as well as Santiago, and we thought that a local approach would help us favor the integration of immigrants and refugees in the different regional municipalities. I would like to congratulate ILO, IOM, and UNHCR for the joint efforts that they have done. The efforts of IOM have been instrumental, and I would like to celebrate the efforts of the local governments of the cities of Santiago and Mexico City, because otherwise we wouldn't have the results that we see today. If we look at unemployment data resulting from the COVID pandemic, and in view of the structure of the situation in our countries, we see that the unemployment rate in Chile was 8.5. Migrant women, and by this I mean migrants with regular status, because as you know, there are a lot of migrants with irregular status in our country. The rate is slightly lower, but overall the numbers are the same. I would like to refer to a study performed by the University of Talca in 2021, whereby they described the recovery of the labor market. This is the most important indicator. However, the problem is that even if there was an 81% of migrants who saw their income decrease during the pandemic, many of them had a job, meaning that the problem is not the absence of work, but the absence of quality work. We think that it was instrumental to decide to include this population, particularly in the municipality of Santiago. In 2020, there were more than 220,000 international migrants in the municipality of Santiago, meaning that more than 50% of the downtown Santiago population is of foreign origin. The joint efforts we have undertaken with Santiago, Mexico, and other cities is important for various reasons. First of all, because it helps us see how migration policy becomes increasingly politicized. We see that this is making operational efforts more complicated, and policies needed to respect social standards and rights. That is why we think these spaces offer us an opportunity to show why socioeconomic integration matters. Because oftentimes in the migration narrative, we only see the downside of migration. However, there are benefits to societies and to economies, and they should be appropriately shown. Because otherwise, we do not recognize the fact that migrants are leaving their country of origin for negative reasons, at least in the case of Santiago. So we think that this is an opportunity to react to these highly politicized negative narratives about migration. Second, this highlights the essential role of local governance. I would like to congratulate the efforts of Mexico City, Santiago, São Paulo, Medellín, and we think that it's essential that there is local development within the municipalities, because it's the municipalities who perform the first actions towards local inclusion, and they are essential to help people join social groups and to have access to healthcare. I think that there is a very good news about from the International Monetary Fund, who said in late 2022 that for Latin America, if migrants are quickly included in the countries of destination, this translates into this will translate into an increase of 4.5% in terms of the GDP. Since it's the International Monetary Fund who launched this report and this number, I think we should pay due attention to it and see that the local governments are approving local policies and implementing mechanisms towards efficient integration. Migration and refuge, particularly in the case of Venezuela, is a dynamic movement, and it is a regional situation. So I congratulate the fact that this space allows us to learn from the good practices and the difficulties that Mexico City, São Paulo, Medellín, and Santiago are facing, because as part of these migration flows, we should not only look at the local situation, but to keep a regional perspective. I would like to conclude by inviting this remarkable panel to think how he can thrive on the huge effort that we are doing. We had talked to the team in Chile about creating a network of municipalities or other local partners with the 4 cities that we have mentioned: São Paulo, Medellín, and Mexico City, and so that we can create a joint document that we can present to stakeholders, and to offer a regional perspective that would be beneficial for the Quito mechanism. So I would invite you to formalize this experience and to show this to the stakeholders, to support the findings of the International Monetary Fund. Because in the upcoming years, if we work towards the efficient inclusion of migrants and refugees, we will reap great benefits. I would like to recognize the effort of IOM, ILO, and UNHCR. We are here for you in anything you needed in terms of favoring integration in Santiago and in the region. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Maria Jose, for such an outstanding introduction and for these interesting reflections. Moving forward, I would like to send our regards to Dana Graver-Ladek, Unfortunately, she couldn't join us today, but she addressed us the message, and she is not only IOM Mexico's chief of mission, but the UN resident coordinator. So over to her. Good morning. It is a pleasure to welcome you to this session on behalf of the International Organization for Migration to this international regional exchange of experiences between Mexico City, São Paulo, Medellín, and Santiago. Today, there will be three UN agencies participating: UNHCR, IOM, and ILO, which are essential for the inclusion of asylum seekers, migrants, and refugees. IOM has more than 70 years experience, and we are promoting a dignified, regular, orderly, and safe migration around the world. We target mainly the migrant population. Omar, we are having technical difficulties with the video message. Sorry, is it breaking? Yes. Let me see if our colleague Alonso can share the video, and that way we can avoid this problem. Sorry for the inconvenience, dear colleagues. These are some of the issues that we face in this virtual world, but I think that the problem has been solved. We can't hear the video. The system asks me for a password. Maybe in the interest of time, we can move on, and we will try to show the video at the end of the session. As I said, and building on what Maria Jose said, the most important point is to hand the conversation over to the representatives of the different Latin American cities who are here, so they can share their experiences. I want to briefly go over today's agenda. Before starting this exchange, I will briefly explain the importance of local migration governance indicators, the MGIs. Are indicators developed by IOM, so local governments can assess their local governance with regards to migration, and to see how to address the challenges that they face at the local level. After this, we will have an exchange of experiences where we will hear participants from the municipality of Chile, Mexico City, São Paulo, Brazil, and Medellín, Colombia. Each participant will have between 15 and 20 minutes. And next, we will hear a message from Paloma Oliver, representing the city of Buenos Aires. And next, we will have a Q&A session where we will ask some predefined questions so that our panelists tell us what they have been able to identify after the implementation of the MGIs. Before moving on to my message, I would like to show a video about what the MGIs are. Sorry, I did not introduce Richard. I couldn't see you on the screen. So before all of this, we will hear from Richard Velasquez, Chief of Mission of IOM Chile, and he will address his opening remarks. Over to you. Thank you, Jocelyn. No problem. I would like to take this opportunity to send my regards to Maria Jose Torres, UN Resident Coordinator in Chile, Paloma Oliver from the government of Buenos Aires, Luz Alvarez from Colombia, Brian Rodas, Jorge Garcia. And I would personally like to thank you, Jocelyn, for facilitating this session. And for the work that you have done at the global IGM team. I would like to greet the representative of the Migration Council, as well as the rest of the participants from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Chile. I want to be very brief. And adding to what Maria Jose said, last week we launched the first local migration governance report in Santiago. And as Maria Jose said, indeed, 50% of the local population is of migrant origin. In Chile, we are starting the path towards migration governance, and we are very happy that the municipality of Santiago, as well as other Chilean municipalities, are interested in using this tool. This shows, or this was reflected in the active participation of other municipalities in last week's launch event. We are also very happy to share with you that we are starting to implement the migration governance indicator in a northern community called Arica. And we are looking at how different municipalities think they could implement the MGIs. The migration context varies from one place to another, but we think that it's important to share experiences among municipalities and with other third parties in order to strengthen our migration governance. And of course, the ultimate outcome is to develop policies that are appropriate to each context. The MGIs seek to strengthen or to build the capacities at the local government. And I don't want to miss the opportunity to say this. The MPTF as well as the MGIs are a first effort towards a better collaboration between the central and the local governments. I would like to take a moment to send my regards to all the participants in this session, and I am really looking forward to it. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and over to you, Jocelyn. Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you for mentioning how the initiative has evolved in Chile. I think that it's going to be very important to see how the initiative develops in the country and how other governments join this effort. So I would like to share a video explaining the tool, its origin. We developed this tool in 2018. It was a tool developed by IOM because it saw the importance not only of analyzing the evolution of national migration governance, but also the importance of local governance. That way we would have a deeper perspective about this subject. So can we share the video, please? Approximately 3 billion people around the world go to cities every week. Migration is one of the catalyzers of urbanization around the world, and local governments are essential in this sense. They are in a unique position to address the challenges and to take advantage of opportunities towards the community development. In this sense, IOM, with the support of Economist Impact, has developed the Migration Governance Indicators, or the MGIs. It includes more than 80 indicators which allow local governments to build their capacities towards better migration governance, as well as to identify their areas of improvement. Indicators are specific to each municipality, and after rigorous data collection, governments have the opportunity to discuss the results of the research and to follow up on them and to address and overcome the identified challenges. MGIs are unique. They can be used to improve migration policies, associated policies, something which has been done, or something that has been done in cities such as São Paulo, Medellín, Mexico City, and Santiago. They are also used to strengthen the other capacities, such as those of the governments of Freetown and Buenos Aires. MGIs have the purpose of strengthening migration governance through inclusive and coordinated policies that seek the socioeconomic well-being of migrant populations and their families. As I was saying before we watched the video, MGIs were developed by IOM in 2018. The tool was adapted for the local setting, and the purpose of having a deeper perspective is to understand the local response to many issues that resulted from migration. We know that migration has existed for a very long time, but if migration is properly governed through the right policies so that migration is safe, orderly, and regular, it can create a lot of benefits. And local governments are the ones closest to migrants, and they have had to develop tools or innovative practices. And it's these practices that MGIs seem or seek to synthesize, as well as to identify areas of improvement. Of course, we understand that there are different levels of decentralization. The context is not exactly the same from one local government to the other, so these specificities are acknowledged as part of the MGI. This tool seeks to support local governments to strengthen their institutional capabilities, to manage migration, and to leverage and take advantage of the benefits, as well as to address the challenges that result from migration. As the resident coordinator of Chile said, networking has been essential for us, connecting different cities, creating a network of cities that can exchange good practices is essential. Even if the context is different, good practices can be adapted and leveraged in different settings. For us, the MGI Global Team, it is a pleasure to offer you this network of cities. More than 70 cities worldwide have joined this effort in Chile and in other countries. And as Richard said, this network is growing. This is going to be very positive because if cities within the same country can work as a team and to have regional exchanges, this is going to help us develop more comprehensive, more inclusive, and more responsive practices that address the root causes of different issues that we can address and improve on. To conclude, I wanted to highlight the joint effort between or among the different UN agencies. Today, we have the participation of ILO and UNHCR, who have been instrumental in the migration MPTF, which seeks to strengthen socioeconomic inclusion in Mexico City and Santiago. However, this is not the single effort they have undertaken with the local governments. For example, there is another very important project in the region, which is solidarity and inclusive communities. This is a project that was launched in Colombia. There are other cities in the Dominican Republic, in Panama, and other countries that are joining this effort. So in sum, the UN system understands that the local governments are a partner in supporting their efforts along with the national governments. And we need to bring in the expertise of local governments to deliver on the different objectives within the various global programs. That way, we will create better conditions for the individuals that are behind these processes. And we hope that this is one way to improve their quality of life. So I will stop here, and I will now start the exchange of experiences by handing the floor to the different panelists. So when I say your name, I would invite you, our panelists, to open your mics and to give us your message. As I said in the beginning, you will have between 15 and 20 minutes. First, I would like to hand the floor to Mrs. Rosario Olivares, Subdirector of Gender Equality, Sexual Diversity and Inclusion within the Municipality of Santiago. Thank you, Jocelyn. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I would like to send my regards to Maria Jose Torres, resident coordinator of the UN in Chile, as well as the rest of our panelists. I would like to greet our colleagues from Mexico City, to Jorge, to São Paulo and Medellín, UNHCR and ILO. I would also like to greet the representatives of ACUD as well as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I prepared a presentation to support what I want to share with you. So first of all, I would like to say that a very short while ago, we had our first migration governance initiative. We didn't have indicators in the past, but we think that this is an opportunity to improve our coordination with the UN as well as with the central government. So I would like to thank all the authorities involved, and I think that this is going to be very important moving forward. As Maria Jose and Richard said, we are a community and just as in the case of other Latin American cities, we have seen an accelerated increase in the number of migrants in our cities. Of course, this has posed us the challenges that we are seeking to address. So, Maria Elena Osorio, myself, and others participated in creating this presentation. So if I speak in plural, it's because I am speaking on behalf of them. So we have had meetings with different local governments. This is essential not only for the MGIs, but for the development of what we call the migration journey, which includes healthcare and educational and participatory components, among others. The main objective of this meeting was to adapt the MGIs to the context of Santiago, which was, of course, very valuable. There were things that we had been working on in a particular way, but we also identified our gaps, and this work was very beneficial. Some of the key subjects we analyzed with the MGIs was access to healthcare and education, regardless of the migration status. Today, irregular migrants do not have access to certain rights. However, we are working to favor access to these other rights, but healthcare and education are covered. Also, as I said, we have a migrant assistance office at the local level, which is responsible for coordinating its efforts with other local entities. And we are also developing partnerships with the UN system, academia, as well as civil society. Not only do we get this legal advice or other forms of support, but we are able to have a constant communication and develop a more inclusive cities. There is also specific program implementation to facilitate and promote the inclusion of migrants in our country. As a result of the MGIs, we have also assessed the procedures and the measures to protect migrant children and adolescents in emergency situations. So we think that this is a key topic, and that is why we insisted on the development of family shelters, so children would be appropriately protected in the case of going or experiencing an emergency, or in case of living in the street. We also assess our capacity to identify victims of a crime. These efforts have been key to identify victims of gender-based violence or domestic violence, as we still call it. So MGIs have broadened our scope of work. In terms of health, I would like to highlight the work of the family healthcare centers. These are located in the different neighborhoods, which is contrary to Chilean tradition, where everything is centralized. We are a community that is composed of a high number of neighborhoods, and these family healthcare centers provide direct assistance, and they are financed by the municipality. In terms of education, we have 44 educational centers. Santiago is the heart of public education, and in many of our schools and museums, there is a high number of migrant students, up to 70%. So not only have we supported them in joining a school, but a comprehensive perspective of education takes into account how to make them a real actor in the educational setting. So, second, the Migrant Assistance Office was meant to facilitate the bureaucratic journey of migrants and to integrate our departments better. So right now we have different branches such as social assistance, intercultural affairs, as well as integration. As I said in the beginning, we are a partner of the UNMPTF, and as a result, we have developed a migrant journey, and we have facilitated the UN visits in Santiago. We have exchanged the best practices with other cities. We have worked with Mexico City, but we have also been able to share our case with other global cities. Given the difficulties we have in our country as a result of a high rate of irregular migrants, we are working towards a better labor integration. And this is not only an effort done by the labor authorities. Our country is highly centralized, so in order for our policies to move forward, they should come from the central government and not only from the municipality. We will continue to work in improving child protection, particularly in case of emergency. And the objective of our multidisciplinary team is to provide due support to victims of a crime. As I mentioned in the beginning, the MGIs allowed us to identify our gaps. As a pioneer municipality in this effort, we did see that there are a lot of gaps, but we are also a local government that has been in office for a little over a year, and our efforts have been very constant. We have provided the training to public officials about intercultural affairs. So we have an online course, for example, titled Intercultural Affairs, Gender and Labor Migration for Local Governance. So whenever public officials want to take this course, they can do so. We also had an in-person course called good co-living and intercultural challenges, and this seeks to improve the work of the local authorities. We are also about to launch our migration journey manual, which we think is going to be helpful for other local governments. It seeks to serve as a tool so migrants can support or so that migrants can be supported by different branches of the municipality. And as Maria Jose said, the purpose of this is also to continue our exchanges. So we think that this is a very positive output. We also wanted to mention something that we are very proud of. Maria Jose was there when we launched this effort. The Deputy Department of Inclusion and Gender Diversity created a good practice which is new in Chile. It seeks to develop an intersectional policy. So here we don't only have the participation of the Migrant Assistance Office, but also the Indigenous Affairs Office, the Women and Equality Office, and the Sexual Diversity Office. So the purpose is that within this practice, people will not only be seen as individuals with one vulnerability factor and another, but individuals that face different vulnerabilities at the same time. And we hope to exchange our insights and our practices with other national and international partners. In order to improve the situation of migrants and the other beneficiary groups, so we developed the neighborhood welfare system. This is a local strategy that is being developed by Chile in discussion with global partners, and it is one of the main programs supported by President Gabriel Boric. We will soon inaugurate Casa Igualdad. Casa Igualdad is a space where we will provide different forms of assistance to address the post-pandemic crisis of carers and of care work, and we are going to focus on policies around care work. I think as part of this presentation, it is very important to mention that we are going to develop a paid care work initiative for women who provide care. So if they need support to go and run errands, the care worker brigade, as we call it, is going to support them. The care worker brigade was also trained by UN experts, and it is going to help primary caregivers so they have better access to employment, and we will also provide psychological assistance and other forms of support. We have insisted on the importance of mental health among primary caregivers. And also, we also have the idea that the Casa Igualdad will provide psychological support to deal with the process of migration, which can be highly impactful. We also know that another need is that of persons with a disability among the elderly population. We will also have a trans specialized team for children and adolescents because we have a very high suicide rates among our trans population. For example, among the migrant trans population. So we seek to support them in avoiding these mental health issues that affect them to the extent that they're willing to take their own life. Sorry, you have 2 minutes. I am 2 seconds away from the end. So we are also going to launch the migrant mediation team that will be comprised of social workers, lawyers, and psychologists. We will also have an office against violence and non-discrimination, particularly for the historically marginalized populations. And we will organize workshops, training, self-care sessions, and community spaces. We are also going to invite women to participate in the neighborhood in the south of Santiago, which is a low income neighborhood. That's where we are going to open a Casa Igualdad. So that way, the whole population of Santiago will be comfortable with, and they will feel that they are taken care of. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you, Rosario, for your participation. About caregiving duties, we will hear Tamer, who works in the Migration Council. And maybe he will mention the Global City Fund, which is oriented towards the well-being of caregivers. So as we see, there is already an opportunity for further exchange. I would like to hand it over to Jorge Garcia Hidalgo from the Department of Inclusion and Social Welfare. So over to you, Jorge. Thank you very much. I am very happy to be in this event. I would like to send my regards to my colleagues from São Paulo, Medellín, Santiago, and to the UN officials who made this meeting possible. I would like to send a particularly kind regards to somebody in view of the past work we have done. In order to give more time to the questions and to be very brief, I would like to mention that since 2011, a law was passed in Mexico City. It is called the Intercultural Law for Migrant Inclusion and Human Mobility. It is a local law that is implemented in Mexico City, and it acknowledges and protects the rights of every person regardless of their migration status. Currently, the government of Mexico City is revising the law, and there is a draft law that has already been approved by the specialized commissions, and it is going to move on to discussion from the plenary. You can look at it that way. It's the intercultural law, or ley de interculturalidad in Spanish. So the definition of a migrant in the law was a guest. The new law doesn't call them guests anymore, but what matters is that Mexico City authorities now have the power to protect and ensure access to every right, regardless of the migration status of a person. One of the law's articles explicitly says that the migrating is an individual right, and that in Mexico City, nobody can be considered illegal. The scope of protection of this law passed in 2011 has allowed all the local authorities to be aligned and to implement actions for the benefit and protection of migrants regardless of their status. About the work that we have implemented with IOM and Proyecto Ciudades, or the Cities project. We started incorporating migration governance indicators. This effort foresees the creation of the Mobility Commission, which is a body that defines public policies that support the migrants, and it is also responsible for developing any new laws when relevant. So the city of Mexico City is divided into alcaldías, the closest equivalent of which is a municipality. So we have the representatives of the different municipalities of Mexico City, as well as the Mexico City Attorney's Office. We have invited as observers IOM, the National Migration Institute, among others. Within this commission, we have implemented different actions. Our last activity was a virtual one, and it sought a better alignment among different local authorities. We wanted to facilitate or to streamline the rights access mechanism that every migrant should have access to, because the reality is that we have a law that protects rights, but the actual mechanisms to have access to benefits and programs is limited. In 2020, we had 144 social welfare programs, either at the municipality level or within the central government of Mexico City. In the municipalities, we have 102 programs, and the remaining 42 are coordinated by Mexico City. In Mexico, every person has a document called the unique identification document. And not only Mexican nationals, but migrants receive the CURP, C-U-R-P, which is a population ID code. However, we have a lot of migrants with irregular status who still don't have a CURP. However, but according to the intercultural law, they should still be given the right to benefit from public programs. We also have the guest record of Mexico City. The guest record of Mexico City provides migrants a certificate of a presence in Mexico City, which is like an ID for the individual. And it comes with a picture, the name, and the address. To get this certificate, online registration is needed. And as I said, this is like an ID that helps people provide an official identification document. So if they want to have access to any of the 102 municipality programs, they can do it with this ID. I will not give you details about our work, but the Department of Social Welfare is entitled to develop and review the operational rules of all welfare programs at the city level. We are reviewing the access mechanisms of all public programs to verify that they accept as a valid ID the certificate that migrants obtain when they register themselves in the city's guest record. So we are legally entitled to provide support and not only access to the different rights, such as health, education, employment, but also access to one of the 144 public programs that provide specific forms of support for different population groups. So this is what I wanted to say about migrant inclusion in Mexico City. Also, as part of our adaptation of the MGI, so we decided to develop indicators about partnerships. There are at least 30 CSOs that support persons in human mobility, and they provide the temporary shelter to migrants in transit, or they will go as far as providing legal representation, advocacy, as well as lobbying efforts for the adaptation of different laws. The government of Mexico City has supported these organizations in different ways, starting with the tax benefits or through donations such as uh, blankets or bedspreads for shelters. In 2021, we had an uptick in the arrival of migrants from Haiti, but since October 2021, a special mechanism was passed for Venezuelan migrants. However, as a result of misinformation promoted by traffickers, Venezuelans thought that the US-Mexico border would be opened. That's what they would tell us. So there was a disproportionate increase in arrivals from Venezuelan migrants who are traveling with their family or with children, and sometimes they have walked all the way from Panama. As a result, our shelters were full, but response was also supported by what we call the public diners. CIVISO, or the Welfare Department of Mexico City, has different public diners, and here we also made efforts to communicate the work that they do, etc. So we have been serving between 500 and 600 servings every day in the public diners, and we have also provided servings to individuals in shelters. So we are providing free servings to any person that approaches the community kitchens. We also have a distribution points such as in the local bus stations, so they can have a warm meal. About the other subjects, In terms of access to dignified labor, we have a very strong partnership with the Labor Department of Mexico City. And what we seek is to facilitate access to formal labor. However, we need the migrants to have a regular status in order to facilitate access to them. In the past 2 years, we have seen a high increase of migrants in transit, and the National Institute of Migration. Sorry, Jorge, you have 2 minutes. I just wanted to say that some migrants arrive with a temporary irregular status to the city. And that way they can have access to formal employment. Proyecto Ciudades also developed a training model to promote capacity building, and those who finished the course obtained a labor capacity certificate. We developed this mechanism with the support of ILO Mexico in a partnership with the labor sector and the labor sectors that have most demand for workers, in particular installation and maintenance of photovoltaic cells. We have already reaped the fruits of our efforts. So we have gained some experiences that we're going to continue in the future, and that would be the end of my intervention. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jorge, for such an outstanding participation. I would like to emphasize how you have facilitated access to services and to regular status, because during our conversation, we are going to go deeper into this subject, but overall, this is essential to ensure inclusion of migrants and to make sure that migrants can bring more benefits to the hosting communities. I would like to greet the representatives of the government of Mexico who are joining us today. But I would like to share a curious fact with you. Mexico is the country that has more MGI assessments. It's 9 states that have implemented the MGI model, including Mexico City, and we hope that this continues, and not only in terms of quantity, but quality. And we hope that this will help us develop a comprehensive migration governance policy in the country. Without further ado, I would like to ask Brian Rodas, my coordinator of immigration policies for the promotion of decent labor, to take the floor.
Obrigado. Thank you. I wanted to salute the colleagues from the Santiago, Medellín, and Mexico City municipalities who are here with us. It's great to be able to discuss local migration policies and to strengthen the role of municipalities and their populations. Regarding São Paulo, I'm really happy because in 2019, we joined the initiative with Montreal, and I also wanted to greet you and to thank you for inviting me to engage in this dialogue so I could share the work performed in São Paulo within the MTI framework and to cover the latest developments. Thank you. I also wanted to reinforce that our work with the OIM in discussion forums and local policies, although we have not participated in other reports, I did want to strengthen that, underscore that São Paulo, along with other 40 local governments, is deeply engaged as the source of the MGI. And Brazil particularly performed an assessment study for information and data production on local policies and a forum to perform a comparative analysis too. São Paulo appreciates the efforts to promote discussion forums and to endorse local public policies. I was not able to share my presentation, but remember what I'm going to say. So if you have questions, please go ahead. My Spanish is not at its best. I'm actually speaking Portuñol, a language that does not necessarily exist. São Paulo, this migration history dates back, and local governments have responded accordingly. In 2013, we promoted the efforts for decent work within the framework to encourage actions and local policies to strengthen population's rights within an environment of governance within the Citizens' Rights Secretariat of São Paulo. So in 2013, a major movement of the social migratory groups demanded that São Paulo build public policies and bureaucratic and administrative processes that would address and the implementation of public policies. The coordination agency is the product of that participatory effort. Civil society of the city of São Paulo, as well as the local government. As of 2013, the coordination agency started to include social participation and social engagement rules to draft a law similar to the Mexican law. If you Google Bill 16478 of 2016, it institutionalized the municipal code of the city of São Paulo with a strong paradigm to locally reconstruct the immigration perspective. The first article stated or described the boundaries of the migratory population as to address the different conditions and the different documentary perspective, including labor migrants, refugees, stateless persons, students, regardless the status of their documentation. This is important because São Paulo shifted the public policy paradigm within a scenario where the federal government still was trying to coming out the former law that was in effect during the dictatorship in Brazil. So São Paulo, to innovate the public policy building process in alignment with a human rights perspective, decided to innovate it by building a legislation that acts accordingly with contemporary migratory flows as well as the human rights perspective. This law in praxis states that it is a shared responsibility between the different stakeholders of the state of São Paulo, the Human Rights Secretary, the Health Secretary, the Development and Labor Secretary, the Social Defense Secretary, to implement the policy and to follow a cross-functional intersecretarial perspective in the understanding that social public policy in Brazil have a federal coordination structure such as health, labor, education, and others that need local coordination when embracing the discussion to consider the public policies locally, including the migration topic. So it is shared responsibility to be intersectorial, to be cross-functional regarding migration, and to address the topic with the other secretariats. In 2016, the legislation became institutional in the city of São Paulo, and the coordination started working in the process to promote the rights of migrant populations through different policies, along with different stakeholders, the municipal secretariats, in constant dialogue with civil society, and in constant dialogue too with international organizations such as the ILO, such as the IMO as well. In 2016, the law was enacted with different frameworks, such as the second municipal conference for migrant populations, because as I mentioned, there is a strong social participation component in our framework, because in São Paulo, migrants are not entitled to social participation. They cannot vote at any, at the municipal, state, or federal level. So we understand that dimension of migrants as rights holders, and now they will be able to engage, to vote, or to be voted for. And in that participatory environment, we'll be able to monitor and assess the public policies implemented in São Paulo by the mayor. In 2016, the municipal Congress started working, and in 2023, we will run new elections to renew the council and to engage in a new social learning process to monitor, control and track down public policies. In 2016, we worked with the different secretariats too. In labor terms, there's always been dialogue with the Development and Labor Secretariat through an instrument that created working groups with the corresponding secretariats. With the Decent Work Secretariat, we created a group called Gente Migra, migrating people in English, that implements the process, because one of the major issues to overcome, not only in São Paulo, but at the national level, is that many of those policies when they encompass municipalities, the states, or the federation, face serious difficulties in promoting actions within the registry, especially when they have to fill out their nationality, or when the form it has to demands to filling out the number, the photo number of the migratory document. So with the labor department, but from that specific form, we have started to adapt to the context within the different territories and to address the challenges posed by the city of São Paulo in decent work, social inclusion. Because as you know, in Brazil, there is a legislative issue that may restrict how the access to the market, to the labor market, will be implemented, unlike Mexico, Chile, or Colombia. And the city of São Paulo works with the different secretariats through that process by knocking on their door and telling them, we have a municipal policy. We know that your policies are well designed. We know that there are perspectives. You know that there's a multi-tier administrative system. So we wish to implement that in the different territories and different contexts within the city of São Paulo. So it's an ant type work, it's little by little, detail by detail, to improve and to develop public policies to ensure access and permanence of the populations. In the healthcare system, there's a task force involved, and it was created as from the challenges imposed by the sanitary crisis in the pandemic. The migrant populations were provided with access to the public healthcare system. And it was done in order to better focus on that population. In the city of São Paulo, there are different territories in charge of whom the secretariats are in charge of. And we wanted to ensure not only access, but permanence too. So it requires internal dialogue at city hall level, at municipal level. And the main tools used are creating task forces, working groups, and discussion forums with the stakeholders. Social organizations and civil society are also there, as well as international organizations who try to bring oxygen to civil society demands and to provide technical support and to engage those actions with different programs within the municipality. As part of the process, on top of the intersectoral and cross-functional articulation to implement policies in the city of São Paulo, I wish to tell you that since 2014, a permanent institution was established, which is the Center to Provide Care for Migrants. It is an institution linked to the Human Rights Commission to not physically, but to welcome migrants and to be the main port of entry of migrants to the city of São Paulo, provide them with access to the services provided by the Secretariat. And it covers documentation, which is the Federation's responsibility. It is an extremely expensive and bureaucratic process, the documentation process, and it strives to assist the migrants to understand the situation, to understand the path to be followed. So it includes the documentation section where migrants can have access to services provided in 7 languages, because we welcome many nationalities and many languages are spoken. So it is the main demand, and people need to feel interculturally welcomed. And by providing intercultural follow-up, we tried to, we help them to feel identified, to feel part of. So by helping them with the documentation, they know that they can then have access to work, education, health, and we teach them Portuguese as well. So so interculturality is fully provided. So for that to be possible, we provide interdisciplinary assistance too, with social workers, legal, and psychological assistance too. So migrants can build the trust process. You know, that trust process is built by fulfilling complex demands to prevent human rights violations. So this interdisciplinary team is there to address complex demands and requests, to listen to the migrants and to reconstruct or to reestablish the rights that were infringed, such as human rights violations, human trafficking, gender-based violence, racism, xenophobia, slavery, modern slavery. So these services try to address the different situations that may arise. And the institution, 2 minutes left, please. Okay, I'm about to wrap this up. So on top of sharing that perspective of becoming a reference center for the migrant population, this institution is also a reference center for the municipality services network. As a reference center, and due to the complexity of the social public policies in Brazil and that sector reality, the schools, the reference centers of social assistance, or the reference centers from other secretariats for labor workers try to provide assistance to the migrants. So it's a reference center for the migrant population, and it also includes the rights network of the city of São Paulo. So from the 2019 MGI, we learned how the services have evolved because we broadened the institution's technical team. We hired new social workers, legal workers, and psychologists. And to conclude, we now have a mobile unit that is circulating all over the city to promote articulation with the territorial network and with the population, to provide care and to strengthen the network's services. Those are the different fronts, such as social participation through the council and the reference center of the institution, as well as the sectorial and linkage. with the different entities throughout Brazil and São Paulo. Thank you very much. I apologize for taking more time than was allocated. I'm here for the Q&A session.
Thank you, Brian. I just wanted to let the participants know that you can send us your questions through the Q&A chat. We will look at your questions at the end of this last session. Going back to what Brian was saying, and going back to the 2018 assessment, and in contrast to what we see today, I wanted to mention that the MGI tool, after the first assessment, approximately 3 years later, the MGI allows a follow-up assessment to identify areas of progress. If there are areas where there have been additional developments, it can be identified with this tool, which is important for monitoring and consolidation. Without further ado, I would like to hand the floor over to Luis Álvarez, to Luz Ángela Álvarez Henao from Medellín. Hello, good morning and good afternoon to those of you who are joining us from other cities. I would like to send my regards to the fellow representatives of the governments of São Paulo, Mexico City, and Santiago, to the organizers, and to Paloma in particular, because we have already had the opportunity to share some experiences in Panama, and we have worked together in a global migration initiatives. All of this has helped Medellín improve in migration management. To give you some context, and in contrast to the cities that have participated already, Medellín has recently received the migrants. Historically, Colombia has been a country of origin and not a country of destination of migrants, but after the higher flows of migrants from Venezuela, we also became destination cities, not only for Venezuelan migrants, but for the population fleeing the armed conflict in Colombia. The experience from these cities and countries have helped us move forward a little bit faster in providing support to migrants. With the high inflow of Venezuelan migrants into Colombia, the country passed the temporary protection mechanism, which has been very important at the local level. As a centralized country, migration affairs are not within the jurisdiction of the municipality of Medellín, but when we received more irregular migrants, we had to do something to facilitate access to health and education. However, economic and cultural integration were more difficult, as well as inclusion. However, thanks to these initiatives, we have improved our services offered for this population, and we are now currently working on some remaining points that are still pending. It's important to note that this specialized protection status only applies for Venezuelan migrants. Also, any public official or anybody delivering public services to the population recognize the temporary protection status, which is the starting point to get other types of assistance. So that is more or less the situation in Medellin. And we are also working to improve what we offer to the migrant population, and we are doing this in respect of the national and international law, regardless of the migration status. We have also taken steps forward in the sense of what we are offering. For example, the MGIs. Currently, the MGIs are helping us tailor Medellin's migration policy. It hasn't been formalized yet, but we are already far ahead. And it has been very useful for us to participate in migration policy events and other exchanges with Central America. That way, we have collected experiences to see how other cities have managed migration. After this overview, I want to share what we have done in Medellin to provide assistance to migrants. So we first provided the service to migrants through the emergency line. The emergency phone line has existed for more than 20 years. However, since 2017, Venezuelan migrants started arriving in high vulnerability conditions, and we started delivering support through the 123 number. The number of calls increased and then decreased, but overall it's very important to keep a direct touch with our district, especially when they needed to ask for emergency help. This mechanism has been a very important, and the population recognizes its value. Normally, when an irregular migrant arrives in a country of destination, they don't want to get in touch with the public authorities. However, our emergency phone line has allowed us to get in touch for a first time with them, then facilitate access to public programs and favor inclusion. About the forms of support that migrants ask us for, I would mention the vital support, for example, when they don't have food, or when they are living in the street, or when the rights of children or adolescents are compromised, or emotional situations. So these are the main reasons why migrants call the emergency number. With the support of the Global Migration Fund for cities and during the COVID-19 pandemic, we provided the direct cash transfers to migrants so they would pay for housing and food with for 3 months. Normally, migrants live in his shared spaces, so he used the cash transfers so Venezuelan families could live in a single house. What we want is for migrants to transition from hotels and guest houses to regular housing that will help them be integrated in schools and to have access to healthcare. When the COVID pandemic started, we made efforts to ensure access to healthcare, to sexual and reproductive health services, to promote empowerment so families can overcome the emergency situation they are in. The objective is that they are able to get out of their vulnerability. So as you see, this is a first welcoming policy, but this is not all. Whenever migrants decided to do so, they are able to make their own decisions and leave the shelters without the risk of living in the street again. So the first initiative was the housing support that I mentioned, and this is a picture from the first donors of the program. And here we are visiting one of the guest houses. One of the initiatives of the previous government was to develop migrant integration centers. We have 8 in the country, and Medellín was the third city to open a center of this sort. We have developed this initiative with other partners, and we have received the international funding from many theses such as IOM, USA, and others. And we seek to offer a first point of contact between migrants and the public authorities so they get healthcare, social support, education, legal advice, economic integration. So this is what we would like to continue to promote. This initiative has been in place for 6 months, and we seek to expand the services to include areas such as entertainment. So not only are we providing this form of support, but we are complementing this with initial funding for economic initiatives, as well as other forms of support that will help with the migrant integration. I would like to share the results of our housing policy and the mechanisms that we have implemented, and to describe the labor profile and the skills of the beneficiaries that give us ideas about how to facilitate inclusion and promote economic independence. So this mechanism has been in place since July last year, and between July and September, approximately 1,000 persons have benefited from this program. As you see, the majority of them are irregular migrants, or regular migrants rather, which helps us improve or provide a larger access to services, but we also have individuals with irregular migration status. They have irregular status either because they arrived after the expiry of the temporary protection policy or for other reasons. So at the Integration Center, we provide information for the people who could still be benefited by the regular protection, regular and temporary protection status. At the Integration Center, not only do we provide the services to the Venezuelan population, but also to Colombian and Colombian Venezuelan population. Venezuela was one of the main countries of a destination of Colombian migrants in the past, and now we have a high number of returning migrants. And we hope that this will help us integrate the populations better. These are the educational credentials of the population we provide assistance to. They don't have, or they don't normally have high education degrees. The majority of them has either a secondary education diploma or an elementary education diploma. And right now we are also working on the compatibility and the validation of international certificates because this is not a local, or this doesn't fall within the local jurisdiction. It is the national authority that validates international diplomas, and it's essential that we can validate their skills so that we can make the best of the human capital that we are receiving. The majority of those who have a higher education diplomas are experts in education, management, nursing. And it's important to mention that we wanted to position ourselves as a leader in technology within the framework of the fourth industrial revolution. And as a result, we seek to provide computers to all elementary and secondary school students and Venezuelan children who are enrolled in the educational system of Medellín, who add up to 34,000 more or less, are receiving computers and are being trained in digital skills. So they are participating in the city's policy of technological skill development. So we have a huge opportunity to develop these activities in terms of life skills, and in view of the migrants profiles. Many of them have a low digital literacy, and they don't know how to use social media and other digital communication means. We have identified other soft skills among the migrant population, which is not digital. The majority of The beneficiaries are unemployed, and those that are employed normally have an informal job. In terms of being prepared for the formal labor market, and many of them don't have CVs, so we are providing some training sessions so they can prepare their CV and take it to interviews. About entrepreneurship, there is a very low percentage of individuals who have operating entrepreneurial projects. The majority of them have a business idea or reported performing informal economic jobs. And we are working together with the local economy department to leverage this human capital. About education and access to financial services, this population is highly marginalized. So we are providing training to facilitate economic inclusion. At the Integration Center, the education and the finance assessment team has developed a toolbox to document the skills that the beneficiaries have, and to elaborate a detailed assessment as well as a training plan. We see that for the majority of the population, there is a very strong need for training. And we seek to identify as well to their skills so we can promote economic integration among this population. Other private and public actors have participated, and they have helped us articulate our service offer. I wanted to emphasize economic inclusion, even if it is not the main topic of our conversation. But there is also legal advice, psychological support, and these services are spread around the city. Sorry, Luz Angela, you have 1 minute. So to conclude, we have identified the different barriers in this population. They show a high level of mobility. They need financial training. They need a training in how to put together a CV. There is an educational gap. There is also a lack of information about how to hire a migrant worker in companies. So what we want is to compensate for the lack of a solid public policy, which we hope will be passed this year. That way, we will address the public challenges we face and to make sure that the integration of migrants can be well coordinated, safe, and that it translates into development for the city. So we have a very good inputs, and it is great to participate in spaces such as this one to share our experience and to learn from the case of other cities and their experience. To finish, I would like to say that I have particularly interested in the intercultural models you were mentioning. So I hope that at some point we can talk about how to create an intercultural program. Thank you so much. Thank you, Luz Angela. Thank you to our panelists for their excellent presentations. I think they have been very good practices that are worth highlighting, such as the Casa de la Igualdad in Chile, the CRAI in Chile, the universal ID for migrants in Mexico City, then the integration centers in Medellín. And we will stay here for an additional hour if we continue to talk about these good practices. But it is a pleasure to see that there are so many and that you were able to share them with us in the brief time you had. So we have several questions from the audience, but in the interest of time, I will leave those for the end. If we can put them together into a single round of questions, that would be great. Now I will move on to the Q&A for the participants. I would like to hand the floor over to Paloma Oliver so she shares some of the good practices of Buenos Aires as well as her impression of what she has heard so far. So over to you, Paloma. Thank you so much, Jocelyn. Good afternoon. It's the afternoon here in Buenos Aires. My regards to the representatives of local governments and the UN agencies, IOM, ILO, UNHCR, and the rest of the session's participants. I understand that we don't have a lot of time, so I will try to be brief. I do not feel competent enough to make any comments about the previous presentations, but I recognize that your experiences are great and that you have efficiently condensated them into a couple of minutes. So we have work to improve our migration governance, and even if the context is different, before moving on, I would like to say that the autonomous city of Buenos Aires takes as its starting point the idea that migrating is a human right. I am the coordinator of the Buenos Aires Migrante program, or Migrant Buenos Aires. And this program is subjected to the collective authorities, the government, as well as the Deputy Director's Office of Human Rights and Interculturality. All of this is to say that human rights are the cross-cutting point of our policies. Some statistics. I would like to share my regards with Luz Angela because we met in Panama a little while ago, and she said that migration is somewhat new in Medellin. In contrast, in Buenos Aires, we have a long migration tradition. In Argentina, approximately 5% of the population is of migrant origin, and in Buenos Aires, this adds up or this increases to 12.3%. And the migrants are not only of Venezuelan origin. There are a lot of communities that migrated a very long while ago, up to a century ago, and we have other communities that arrived more recently. So 12.2% of the population of Buenos Aires is of migrant origin, and let me see if I can show you the geographic distribution. So Venezuelans represented 22.7% of that 12.2%. Next comes Bolivia with 17.1%, Paraguay with 16.9%, and Peru 12.9%. Bolivia, Paraguay, and Peru are the most or have been the most representative migrant communities in the past 50 years. With the crisis in Venezuela, we had increased migration inflows, and that is why the proportion was modified. We worked in developing MGIs with IOM. I want to thank them because this effort was very fruitful, and the city government is very large, and every public department has one form of support or another for migrants. MGI helped us reflect on the work that we have done, and I wanted to congratulate them for their support. I won't go into the details of each area. And we are also working not only in terms of migrant support, but also about economic policy. As my colleague from Mexico said, there is a national migration law that was passed in 2004. It's not new. However, even if we have bylaws and operational rules, there is both a percentage of local and migrant population that is not aware of this law. So this law is outstanding for recognizing migration as an essential and an inalienable right, and it recognizes that services should be granted without conditioning assistance to migration status. Status has been mentioned by colleagues from other cities, but this is not an obstacle to have access to certain rights in Buenos Aires or to fundamental rights recognized by the law. This is a fundamental difference between this law and the previous one. So there is a program called Buenos Aires Migrantes that was launched in 2018. And even though there had been previous programs of this sort, this one is particular for two reasons. First of all, it seeks to inform and to provide advice to migrants about the rights that they have in the city. Immigration procedures are the responsibility of the national government and not the government of the city of Buenos Aires, and the procedure can be complicated. So we have information sessions to provide guidance in this sense. The other axis of this program is to raise awareness among the local population. It is essential that locals understand the need to include migrants in the social, political, economic, and cultural life. So this is what we do in Va Migrante, or the Buenos Aires Migrante program. Va Migrante is a physical space where we have experts providing guidance about education, justice, healthcare, and we share information in events or areas where we know that there are a high number of migrants. So that is the main activity. Next, we have the Hola Soy Migrante guide, which is a summary of the procedures that migrants needed to undergo when they arrive in Buenos Aires. We also have Spanish lessons, and we have educational sessions with the private sector that we organize alongside IOM, so they understand how to hire migrants and refugees. So we have different activities that change depending on the community that we are working with. When we had the first large inflow of Venezuelans with higher education degrees, and they needed to have their diploma validated, we helped them see how they could do this. So this answers to the different to the needs of different populations. We also provide a lot of, or give a lot of importance to labor inclusion, because it is one of the main sources of income for migrants. In this sense, since 2021, we, along with the UNHCR, developed a labor inclusion program for migrant and refugee women. These programs seek to build or to strengthen the capacity of displaced, stateless, migrant or refugee women to join the labor market. We have already said that during this session that women are more prone to unemployment or to informal labor, as well as unpaid care work. That is why we decided to target women. Why did we do this and focus on technology? Software and IT are one of the most growing economic sectors, and there is a lot of demand for skilled workers, and the wages are normally higher than for the rest of the jobs. And there is a relatively low number of women in IT. What we did was to create two programs, which are Nosotras Conectadas and Experiencia Activa. Nosotras Conectadas is a hard skills program, while the Experiencia Activa is a soft skills program that seeks to facilitate access to the labor field. There is a lot of or a huge lack of information about how the Argentinian labor market works. So we seek to help women improve in these sessions. So 100 women benefited from Nosotras Conectadas, and 480 in Experiencia Activa. And currently, there are approximately 100 and 150 women who graduated from the program respectively. So this is what we coordinate from the territorial management department. However, there is also the employment department. Sorry, Paloma. Can you conclude your presentation in 1 minute? Thank you. The last thing I wanted to say is that we have Buenos Aires Celebra. This is another awareness raising program that seeks to advance the opportunity for the different communities to participate in a massive cultural event that is organized once a year, so that we know or that we learn from the characteristics of each culture. We think that it's essential to give visibility to these communities and not only to work on policy. There are a lot of things that I couldn't mention, but I think that I managed to deliver my key message. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Paloma, and I am sorry for stopping you short. As you said, we had to condensate the information that has been provided, and I am sure that this will not be the last of our events. We will continue to create opportunities for dialogue at IOM, and I hope that we will continue to enjoy from your active participation, and the rest of the UN agencies are here to support you. I would like to hand it over to my colleague Samuel Saliba from the Majors Migration Council to give the closing remarks. We are still receiving some questions. However, in the interest of time, we will send the questions to the person that you had addressed them to, and we will share the answers via email. So over to you, Samir.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me. Apologies that I'll be speaking in English. I'll allow a bit of time for the translators to switch over. But thank you so much for having me. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Samer Saliba. I'm the head of practice at the Mayor's Migration Council, which is an organization that elevates the voices of mayors and city leaders on issues of migration and displacement. And my role specifically is to ensure that cities have the resources, both the financial and the technical resources, to do the work that you have all heard coming from Latin America today. I'd really like to thank the cities for their leadership and for demonstrating the tremendous potential that all cities have when properly resourced to move beyond temporary responses to migration and displacement towards more long-term whole of city approaches that are more effective and more embedded within the day-to-day services of each of these cities. And I'd like to thank Paloma, Jorge, Brian, Lusa, Rosario, for all the examples that we've heard from Buenos Aires, from Medellín, from Mexico City, from Sao Paulo, and others. I've personally had the privilege of working with Lusa and with Jorge on their projects that they talked about, and I can't do a better job of describing the impact that they've had with just a short amount of time and a short amount of money that my organization was able to help offer Mexico City and Medellín. And you've seen now what a small amount of resources can do for the long-term benefit of these cities and their migrant and displaced communities. But I'd also like to thank the UN agencies and the national governments for playing a supportive role in backing up these cities and ensuring that these cities can have the right knowledge and resources to have as much impact as possible. My role here is to highlight that cities can and should be in the lead of their own local responses to migration and displacement within their cities, and you've seen that. But UN agencies and national governments also have a role to play in making sure that those projects are as successful as possible. The big part of my job is on municipal finance, making sure that city governments have enough resources to implement effective projects of their own design. I was very thankful to work with our executive director and her role on the steering committee of the Multi-Partner Trust Fund, MPTF, in making sure that projects that have local leadership, such as the Santiago de Chile, Mexico City project, could move forward and receive proper support. And we continue to advocate for these international funding and financing mechanisms to consider city governments as potential grantees or beneficiaries of these funding and financing mechanisms. And you can see just from the results of the Santiago de Chile, Mexico City project, that investing in cities not only benefits those cities, but also benefits other cities from learning about what can be done with proper resources. But we don't just advocate internationally or influence existing funding and financing mechanisms. We also have our own. And you heard from Jorge and Luzan Hala about the Global Cities Fund for Migrants and Refugees. It's because of the success of Jorge and Luzan Hala, one of our first, who are among our first 10 grantees, that we've been able to expand now to 28 city grantees across 3 chapters with the Global Cities Fund for Migrants and Refugees. And we also just announced a 3rd chapter specifically focused on children and caregivers, hoping that we can inspire other projects such as the efforts of Santiago in helping the youngest migrants and refugees within your cities. And you can learn more using the link that was provided. But it's because of the efforts of Luzan Hala and in Medellín and Jorge in Mexico City that we were able to prove what can be done when cities have these amount of resources. So for all of the cities that are on the line, thinking about how they can learn from the examples that you've heard from today, what I will say is to just keep demonstrating the leadership that our panelists have exhibited today, to keep showing that cities should be and can be in the lead of their own responses and putting forward project ideas for funding and for financing. And for our international and national partners on the line to keep supporting city governments in these efforts, keep considering city governments as equal partners in your efforts to provide for migrant and refugee communities. Because I can tell you from firsthand experience, city governments make amazing partners and will go above and beyond the initial ideas. And I'm so thankful that everybody here has had a chance to hear from those projects that we've supported in Mexico City and Medellín, but also to hear what is happening in São Paulo, in Santiago, in Buenos Aires as well. I'll stop there. Happy to answer any questions, but thank you for having me.
We are about to finish today's event. And I wanted to reiterate that, as Samir said, with a very few resources, with little time, and sometimes with a few or little capacity, cities can do a lot. They should not be working with a few resources. We should guarantee that we provide a support or that they have a support from different sources, not only from the UN system, but from other partners such as the Majors Migration Council and other organizations, because the core message in this is that local governments are at the core, at the center. They have the expertise and the knowledge, and they are the ones who know what to do. And the rest of us should gather around them and give them the support they need. I would like to conclude by thanking all the cities who believed in this process, in the migration governance indicators, and above and beyond everything about the will that the regional governments have to strengthen their migration governance. This is completely unseen. And I speak from experience when I say that Latin America is one of the strongest regions in this sense. Before inviting you to join our virtual group photo, if you can open your cameras, I would like to thank everyone who is connected today. Thank you to the cities who have shown an interest in this process. And if any of you is interested in the MGI, please let us know. I would like to thank Samer in particular for his support from the Mayor's Migration Council and the support they provided to the local governments, as well as for his closing remarks. Thank you to our panelists, to Maria Jose, Richard, Rosario, Luz Ángela, Brian, Jorge, Paloma. Thank you, Camila González and Constanza Rojas from the Chilean Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Amalia Pereira from the Unitary Division of Migrant Workers in Chile, as well as the representatives of the Workers Collective of Chile. It is the effort of all these stakeholders that will help us move forward in this subject. Without further ado, if you're able to turn your camera on, I would like to take a group of photo like we do in these virtual times. Thank you. Are you taking it, Annie, or should it be me? I already took it. Thank you. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. And we will forward the questions to you. Have a great day.